Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulil kareem. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to our next lesson on Tajweed for beginners. And in this lesson we're sort of picking up where we left off in the last video, talking about joining letters. In order to join letters we need sukoon, and the next demarcation we're going to look at, the next mark we're going to look at is called Shaddah. And Shaddah is essentially a mark that we put on top of letters to symbolize there's actually two letters inside of this one letter. The first of these letters will have sukoon, and the second letter will have the vowel that's on top of it. So these letters will always appear with the shaddah and additionally another vowel marking. So you can almost treat the shaddah like a sukoon, and as long as you connect to it first, get the sukoon on that letter, then you can say the next vowel on that same letter. One of the memory devices that I like to teach for shaddah is connect and stop, then say what's on top. Connect and stop, then say what's on top. Meaning that start with the letter before, you connect to the letter and treat the shaddah like a sukoon, and then you say what's on top, or you say the vowel that's remaining. So let's take this word for example. It starts with the hamza, dhamma, u. Fa is the next letter. It has a shaddah on it. So we treat the shaddah like a sukoon and connect to it first. So hamza, dhamma, fa, sukoon, uff, and then we say what's on the fa, which is a double kasra, which makes an in sound, fin. So this whole word would be uffin, which also means that it can be rewritten like hamza, dhamma, fa, sukoon, then separately fa, double kasra, fin, uff, fin. I want you to imagine it like that. Anytime you see a shaddah, remember there are two letters in there, and I want you to imagine it like this so you don't forget. The part where it gets a little bit tricky is when we're trying to combine qalqala and shaddah. Let's take a look at the first word of Surah Al-Masad that we have here. So the first letter is ta, ta fatha, ta, smile. Next letter is ba. Ba has a shaddah and a fatha. We'll connect and stop on the shaddah, then say the fatha that's on top. So ta fatha, ba sukoon or ba shaddah, tab, and then ba fatha, ba. Tabba. And then it connects finally to a ta sukoon. We just take the t sound of the ta and we say bat. Tabbat. Now you might be wondering, wait, ba is one of the 5 letters of qalqala. Qaf, ta, ba, jim, dal. It has a sukoon here, technically, because you told me that inside of a shaddah there's 2 letters and the first one has sukoon. And so we can rewrite this as ta fatha, ba sukoon, ba fatha, ta sukoon. So why don't we bounce here? Why do we say tabbat and not tabibat? That would be doing qalqala. But shadda is the exception. Because that sukoon is actually not there, we're not going to apply qalqala inside of a shadda. That's the exception. So again, it won't be tabibat, but it'll be tabbat. One of the common and more simple rules seen with shaddas is the rule of ghunna. I want you to say it like ghunna, because that's the rule. The rule is, whenever you have a mim mushaddada or noon mushaddada, or meaning a noon with a shadda on it or a mim with a shadda on it, then you're going to hold the sound of the letter for 2 harakat. Again, harakat here meaning a length in time. So instead of saying this word, hamza kasra noon shadda, in, then saying directly noon fathana, inna, just the fact that this is a noon with a shadda triggers the rule ghunna. So that means we're going to hold it a little longer, 2 extra harakat, and say inna. Same thing with mim. If we had this word, tha, dhamma, thu, mim shadda, thum, and then mim fathamma, thumma, this would trigger the rule and we would apply 2 extra harakat, making it thumma. This is an absolute rule, meaning wherever you see noon shadda or mim shadda in the Quran, every time we'll always say it's +2. Moving on to the topic of long vowels. So we talked about short vowels, which were the fatha, dhamma, kasra, a, I, u. And when we first talked about them, we mentioned that they're all 1 haraka long. They're all about 1 haraka in length. So how do we make it longer? Well, with long vowels, as you might have guessed. And you get a long vowel by joining each of these short vowels with a specific letter. So fatha has to be combined with alif. It's kind of like the a sound with the a sound. And kasra has to be combined with the ya sukoon. And dhamma has to be combined with a waw sukoon. So fatha with alif goes from a to a. Kasra with ya sukoon goes from e to e. And dhamma plus waw sukoon goes from u to u. A, e, u. And we said in one of the earlier videos that's very important to enunciate these vowels. And not saying e, u, and getting lazy with the pronunciation, but rather smiling, e, smiling, u, curling your lips to really enunciate the u sound. This word in the Quran has all 3 long vowels in one word. And then we can see that it's noon with a dhamma followed by waw sukoon, nu, ha with a kasra followed by ya sukoon, hi, and then ha with a fatha followed by alif, making this word nuhiha. All are consistently 2 seconds or 2 harakat. And again, it's very important that the vowel goes with its specific partner. If you have a fatha followed by waw sukoon, that is not going to be a long vowel. That's a different type of rule, and we'll look at that later. Sometimes these letters of mad means a stretch or to elongate. So these letters that elongate, alif, waw sukoon, ya sukoon, in the appropriate context, can also appear as mini letters. For example, we see this often in the Quran, like in the word maliki. Mim, it has a fatha here, but after you don't see a full alif, you see a mini alif. But we treat it exactly like you would treat an alif following a fatha. So instead of maliki, at least in the dialect we're learning, we say maliki because mim has a fatha, but that fatha is followed by an alif. Anytime a fatha is followed by an alif, you have now the fusion of those symbols and it becomes doubly long. So again, instead of maliki, we have maliki if the mini alif is there. And then these are examples of the mini waw and the mini ya. The mini ya looks different than you would expect it to. It has no dots, but many times the ya sukoon can appear without dots, but it'll still be treated like ya. We should note that if the long vowel is on a heavy letter, the fatha and the alif will not make an a sound, they will make an aw sound, aw, frowning, which we've been doing for our heavy letters. This is actually the example of where alif is heavy. We spoke about heavy letters and light letters and how some letters are sometimes heavy and sometimes light. And alif, lam, and ra are the 3 letters that are sometimes heavy and sometimes light. Alif will always be light if it's preceded by a light letter, and it will always be heavy if it's preceded by a heavy letter. Like the example of ba, fatha, alif. You're not going to say ba because alif is a light letter. No. Alif will match the heaviness or the lightness of the letter that comes before it if it has fatha. So ba, fatha, alif would be ba. The alif is not a, it's a here. So that's how it matches that heaviness. And one final note on the long vowels is that when you're pronouncing these long vowels, the a, e, u sound, it's very, very common for especially beginners or non-native Arabic speakers to pronounce these with nasality. And nasality is what it sounds like. It just means to add a nasal sound to something. So in this case, adding a nasal sound to the long vowels, when the long vowels themselves should be clear without nasality. A, e, u. It's not a, e, u. You can hear how that sounds a lot more nasal. And the way to tell, if you're not sure, is to pinch your nose. This is what I call the nose pinch test. So when you say if you stretch out that and you pinch your nose, that takes away any nasality. So if you hear a difference with the nose pinched versus the nose not pinched, and there's a difference, that means you're cutting away the nasality that you're adding to the vowel. If you have no nasality, then it should not make a difference if you pinch your nose or not. But if you do, it'll sound different. So for example, if I use nasality and I say and I do the pinch test, you can hear you can hear the change in the tune. Versus if I say it without nasality, it sounds the same throughout. So this is making the sound come from where it should be, which is the emptiness of the mouth and throat, which if we go back to the makharij, is actually where these 3 letters come from. Then you won't have any nasality. So again, we're saying nuhiha, not nuhiha. That would be making it too nasal. I hope this video was helpful, and inshallah, we will wrap up the beginner level in the next video by going over a few things that you need to know before delving into reading the Quranic text itself. And with that being said, I'll see you in the next one. Salam.